Welcome back, dear students of class 8. I am your social studies teacher and I am back again with a new chapter of your books, that is chapter number 4, Crafts and Industries. So open your books and let's get started with me. So let's see some learning objectives. First is decline in Indian handicrafts, development of modern industries, decline in export of Indian textiles, brain theory. So we are going to study all these things in this chapter. First, let's warm up. Look at the following pictures and according to that you have to answer the questions. First is identify the above picture. Second is which invention according to you was the most important in the Industrial Revolution. Have a class discussion and after that you have to write answers in your books. Now we have application skills. In class 7 we studied about different crafts which were flourishing in India. Traders, artisans and craft people made profits and Indian exports were in high demand across the world. Yet in 1903, the British Governor General of India, Lord Curzon, stated that Indian industries are perishing. Within a short period of time, the flourishing Indian crafts and industries had reached the verge of collapse. So how did this occur? And what do you think was the status of Indian industry at the end of the 19th century? So discuss these questions with your friends and teachers and write answers in your books. Now students, let's start with our chapter. Till the middle of the 18th century, Indian handicraft products were in great demand, specifically in the European markets. Indian silks and cotton textiles held their own foreign markets. The village artisans such as weavers, carpenters and potters met various needs of the people. They produced a course of cloth, various kinds of implements and domestic vessels on a small scale for rough and ready use. They inherited these occupations running in the family for generations. The European traders and trading organization made a huge profit by selling Indian products. The poverty of Indian people was due to British exploitation of Indian resources and the drain of India's wealth to Britain without any adequate return. So जो British लोग थे वो इंडिया का सारा रॉ मटेरियल यूज करके ब्रिटेन में जाके ट्रेड करते थे. इंडियंस को ना तो अपना रॉ मटेरियल मिलता था और ना ही उनकी मेहनत के अकॉर्डिंग उनको पैसे दिए जाते थे. तो इसी के वजह से जो इंडियंस थे वो उस टाइम पे काफी गरीब थे. But by the 19th century, the demand of Indian textile declined across the world. Thousands of Indian weavers lost their source of living. The British disrupted the traditional structure of the Indian economy in two ways. First, by taking away the raw material to England for processing, and second, by bringing the finished products to the Indian market. तो पहला एक तो वो रॉ मटेरियल्स ले जाते थे और दूसरा जो फिनिश्ड प्रोडक्ट्स है वो वापस लेकर आते थे. नाउ नेक्स्ट इज डिक्लाइन इन इंडियन हैंडीक्राफ्ट्स. द टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री ग्रू इन ब्रिटेन व्हिच अफेक्टेड द इंडियन टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री इन मेनी वेज. जो टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री थी वो ब्रिटेन में जाके ग्रो होती थी क्योंकि सारा रॉ मटेरियल तो वो वहां ले जाते थे. तो इस वजह से जो इंडियन टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री थी उनको काफी तरीके से अफेक्ट हुआ. The Calico Act was withdrawn in 1770 and heavy duties were imposed on Indian goods entering Western market. In European and American markets, the Indian textile had to compete with cheaper machine-made British textiles. Imposition of high duties also made it difficult for Indians exporting Indian textiles. The English cotton textile successfully replaced Indian cotton textiles in African, American and European markets. अब ब्रिटिश जो थे वो तो मशीन मेड प्रोडक्ट्स लेकर आते थे और जो इंडियंस थे वो हैंडमेड प्रोडक्ट्स बेचते थे. तो मशीन मेड प्रोडक्ट्स ज्यादा चीपर होते थे हैंडमेड प्रोडक्ट से, तो लोग सस्ते प्रोडक्ट्स को खरीदना ही ज्यादा प्रेफर करते थे. इस वजह से इंडियन लोग जो थे वो इंडिया का ही प्रोडक्ट नहीं बेच पाते थे. Additionally, the British Parliament made export of machine-made British textile in Indian market compulsory. This resulted in a change of scene. The company traders, rather than purchasing Indian cloth for export, now promoted European cloth in Indian market for sale. The expensive handmade Indian cloth could not compete with the cheaper European textile. This led to de-industrialization in India. तो इस वजह से इंडिया में de-industrialization आ गया था. Now here is an extract from History of British India 1805 to 1835. The history of the trade of cotton cloth with India is a melancholy instance of the wrong done to India by the country on which she had become dependent. It was stated in evidence that the cotton and silk goods of India up to this period could be sold for profit in British market at a price from 50 to 60% lower than those fabricated in England. It consequently became necessary to protect the latter by duties of 70 and 80% on their value or by positive prohibition. Had this not been the case, the mills of Paisley and the Manchester would have been stopped at their outset. They were created by the sacrifice of the Indian manufacture. So this was by Horace Hayman Wilson. Now thousands of spinners and weavers in India could not sell their products and became unemployed. British cotton clothes flooded in Indian markets by the 1830s. Moreover, as the company gained more control in India, the Indian rulers lost their power. This affected the Indian handicraft industry, as these rulers had provided patronage to many artists and craftspeople. This is a picture showing handloom. Their livelihood was lost and many shifted to village for agriculture. Major industrial centers such as Dhaka in the east, Petboli, Masulipatnam in the south, Varanasi in the north became deserted. India now turned into a supplier of raw materials from a flourishing trade center. India was drained of its wealth, while the British trade grew and traders became rich. However, this did not result in complete destruction of handloom weaving. Many intricate designs and patterns could not be made by machines. Demand for some traditional clothes was still high among the rich as well as the middle classes. Additionally, the coarse cloth used by some Indians for rough use was not being made in British mills. Later, the national movement also helped in sustaining the traditional cotton textile industry in India. Mahatma Gandhi promoted charkha as a symbol of self-reliance and the use of khadi and urged people to boycott clothes made in English mills. Now our next topic is decline in export of Indian textiles. From the beginning of the 18th century, the wool and silk makers in England were jealous of the popularity of Indian textiles and started protesting against the import of Indian cotton textile. In 1720, the British government passed a law banning the use of printed cotton textiles called chintz in England. At this time, the cotton textile industry was just beginning to develop in England. This is a picture showing a cotton mill in England. The manufacturers were unable to compete with the Indian textile. They wanted to sell their goods in the country by preventing the entry of Indian textiles. The parliament prohibited the import of all dyed clothes, which was followed by a complete ban on the use of printed calicos in England. As cotton industries developed in England, the industrial groups pressurized the government to impose duties on cotton textiles coming from outside, so that the goods manufactured within the country could be easily sold. At the same time, the industrial groups viewed India as a vast market for their mill-made goods. They persuaded the East India Company to sell British manufactured goods in India. The machine-made goods were so cheap that weavers could not compete with them. Now here is a fact file. Even after the rise of modern industry in the country after World War I, the process of de-industrialization in India continued. It meant a fall in the percentage of workers in the agricultural sector. In the years 1881 to 1911, the proportion of the working force engaged in manufacturing, mining and construction fell by half, from 35% to 17%. According to census reports between 1901 and 1941 alone, the percentage of population dependent on agriculture increased from 63.7% to 70%. Now by the middle of 19th century, the weavers faced a new problem. The raw cotton was exported to England and it was difficult to find a fine quality of raw cotton. This is a picture of a cotton ball. As the demand increased, the price of cotton rose exorbitantly. By 1880, two-thirds of all cotton clothes worn by Indians were made of cloth produced in England. This affected not only the weavers but also the spinners. Thousands of rural women who lived by spinning were rendered jobless. Now, after the decline of textile industries, many weavers became agricultural laborers. Some migrated to the cities in search of job, some went to work on the plantation, others became indentured laborers under contract and went to work in Mauritius, Fiji Island, Guyana. Some others got job in new textile mills which were being set up in Bombay, Kanpur and other places. Now next is development of modern industries. Growth of Indian industries took place around 1850s and 60s, though very slowly. The British wanted India to always remain its colony, which could be exploited for furthering the British interest. This is a picture showing the British encouraged plantation crops to serve their commercial benefits. As an effect of the Industrial Revolution in England, in India too, indigenous craftsmanship was replaced by modern and mechanized industrial system. The British improved the plantation industries for their own gain. Cultivation of food crops was replaced by cash crops like indigo, tea, coffee, jute, cinchona, rubber, sugarcane and oilseeds. In Bihar and Bengal, indigo was an important plantation crop. It was used to dye clothes. Another important plantation crop that was grown in Assam, Bengal and South India was tea and coffee. Cinchona and rubber plantations were mostly located in many states of South India. In the second half of 19th century, modern mechanized industries were set up by the British. This gave the industrial scenario in India a complete overhaul. The industries which developed during this time were cotton, jute, coal, iron and steel, sugar and cement. Now next and very important is cotton textile industry. Cotton mills were mostly set up in Ahmedabad, Bombay and Madras. The first cotton mill was set up in Bombay in 1854 by a Parsi merchant, Kovasji Nanabhai. So this is picture showing a cotton industry. These industries produced cotton yarn for Indian cottage industries. India succeeded in making its position among the top textile industries of the world. Now next is jute industry. Jute industry developed in the middle of 19th century. The jute industry was mostly Bengal based. However, the owners of the jute industries were mostly British. The first jute mill was established in Rishra near Calcutta. In 1887, there were around 20 jute mills employing a large number of people. Soon, jute emerged as a major item of export. So, after cotton and jute industry, we have iron and steel industry. India had great reputation for producing quality iron and steel since ages long ago. The iron pillar of Chandragupta Vikramaditya at Mehrauli still stand witness to this fact. Later on, the Mughals as well as Tipu Sultan of Mysore greatly contributed to this great craft. It is said that Tipu Sultan's sword, which was made of high quality steel known as woods, was a great terror of the British. So this is a picture of Tipu Sultan's sword. But in the 19th century, the art of smelting iron was on the decline because of the loss of royal patronage and the laws made by the foreign rulers. In most villages, the furnaces fell into disuse and the production of iron came down drastically. The forest law prevented people from entering the reserved forest. Then, how could the iron smelters get wood for making charcoal, which could be used in furnaces? Thus, they were forced to abandon their ancestral craft of smelting iron. However, colonial rule, the iron and steel industry, one of the basic industry, had a humble beginning in the 19th century. Its production was limited to only 35,000 tons in early years of 20th century. A significant step was the formation of Tata Iron and Steel Company, that is TISCO, now Tata Steels, in the Singhbhum district of Bihar in 1911. The World War I provided a big opportunity to carry out expansion of its plant. Various factors helped TISCO to expand steel production during the First World War. Firstly, as a result of the war, it became quite impossible for the British government to send their steel consignments to India. Secondly, now all the steel that used to be produced in England was required to meet the demands of the war materials that was essential to save Britain from the onslaughts of German forces and their allies. Thirdly, TISCO was asked by the British government to produce shells and carriage wheels for the war. Fourthly, forced by circumstances, the Indian Railway turned to TISCO for the supply of rails. In this way, according to an estimate, by 1919, the British government was forced to buy 90% of steel manufactured by TISCO. As a result, within the next few years, TISCO became the biggest steel industry within the British Empire. This picture is of Jamsetji Nusarwanji Tata, the founder of TISCO. Soon, many other steel companies were established in the West Bengal and Mysore also. The excessive demand created by the World War II further encouraged the industry, and by 1939, a good variety of iron and steel products like pig iron, finished steel and steel ingots began to be produced. Now let's see some other industries. The cement industry was also established around this period. Other important industries were paper, matches, and the glass industry. Thus, the growth of Indian industries, though slow and erratic, was quite notable. Now next is drain theory. Dadabhai Naoroji was the first man to say that internal factors were not the reasons of poverty in India, but poverty was caused by the colonial rule that was draining the wealth and prosperity of India. In 1867, Dadabhai Naoroji put forward the drain of wealth theory, in which he stated that Britain was completely draining India. This picture is of Dadabhai Naoroji. He mentioned this theory in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. He also stated the loss of millions of pounds of revenue to Britain. Dadabhai Naoroji considered it a major evil of British in India. On the footsteps of Dadabhai Naoroji, R.C. Dutt also promoted same theory by keeping it as a major theme of his book Economic History in India. Dadabhai Naoroji gave various factors that caused external drain. These are external rule and administration in India. Second is all the civil administration and army expenses of British were paid by India. India was further exploited by opening the country to free trade. Fourth one is major earners in India during British rule were foreigners. The money they earned was never invested in India to buy anything. Moreover, they left India with that money. Next point is, through different services such as railways, India was giving a huge amount to Britain. Trade as well as Indian labor was deeply undervalued. Along with this, the East India was buying products from India with Indian money and exporting it to Britain. Dadabhai Naoroji was respected both in Britain as well as in India for his loyalty towards British and services for Indians. For this reason, He was elected as a president of Indian National Congress not once or twice but for 3 times. Now next is value and life skills. Through craft, we learn to value and appreciate artifacts and images across cultures and times. Experience in design, art and crafts enable us to reflect critically on our own work and those of others. With that, we are at the end of this chapter now. Let's revise what all we have studied. So here we have recapitulation. Till the middle of 18th century, Indian handicraft products were in great demand. The decline of Indian handicrafts did not occur all of a sudden. It rather came to be systematically ruined by the British. In the 19th century, India faced severe deindustrialization. India was made subservient to the empire and vast wealth was sucked out of the subcontinent. Some of the important industries that developed in India in the second half of the 19th century were the iron and steel industry, the jute industry, textile industry and sugar industry. So with that, we are done with this chapter now. Do read this chapter by yourself once again. We will meet in the next class with a new chapter of history. Till then, take care of yourselves.